Hey, back again. Kung Fu Cowboy here. Richard Delconnor. Creak, creak, creak. I got to get a quiet chair. Okay. Where were we? Oh, yeah. We just finished talking about Coyote in a Graveyard. I'm looking at my marketing list. Who am I? Well, let's go through it and figure out who I am, and then we'll catch up to where I am now. I got all kinds of things going on. I released 32 singles in the last month. Well, I've got them spaced out in the future, but I'm just going to start pumping them out. I was even talking to my mom the other day. It was the first time she didn't. I don't know. My parents are like against my music. They have never listened to my music. They've never supported it. They've never encouraged it. You'd think that I was from some Middle Eastern religion or something, but no, they're Christian. Well, I should say semi-Christian. I actually, once I figured out what Christians were, well, here we go. Okay, so let's move on from Coyote in the Graveyard because we'll be hitting that topic again. All right, number 5 on this list says should have looked ahead. Original and built recording studios for Fleetwood Mac, Frank Zappa, and worked as a session bassist, trained by Tim Bogert. Oh, man, there's so many stories here. Okay, let's see what I can get through on this one. Okay. Recording studios. I think I started to tell you that story. I remodeled Bonita Studio first, and then I remodeled, if I look at my list, I actually used to have a resume of my studio work because I was doing so much of it. And all kinds of famous people hired me to remodel their home studios or do this and that. So I've got a huge list of all the studios I've actually built and designed or customized. But I didn't want to do that. I mean, it was like my job. Carpentry was just a job. I never wanted to be a carpenter. But once I became a recording engineer and then I remodeled the studio, everybody thought, oh, I'm a recording studio designer. Well, I became a recording studio designer, but I didn't want to be. All right, where were we? In fact, I built some very famous studios too. Did some really great stuff. So, I mean, I should take more pride in it. But like I said, that was kind of like, that was supposed to be I didn't even want a side hustle. Okay, where were we? Fleetwood Mac. Oh, yeah, I built that studio for Fleetwood Mac. I did kind of mention that. And do I talk about the drugs and stuff? And Stevie Nicks. There's a girl who worked, she was the nanny for Mick Fleetwood back then. Her name was Sarah, Sarah. And Stevie Nicks wrote a song about her on the Tusk album, which is maybe one of my favorite songs on that album. There's only a few songs I like. I can get into the production. I was there for the recording of the Tusk album. And actually, I will give credit for the one thing that I was always disgruntled about. Creak, sorry about that. Anyway, when Mick was recording for Tusk, Mick Fleetwood, he would record his drums. He would record one thing at a time, just the kick drum. He'd be listening with earphones. He'd just do the kick drum. Boom, boom, boom. They'd record. Then he'd come back, just do the snare. And then they would run the tape again, and he'd just do the hi-hat. And that was it. Then you put all three together, and you got kick, drum, snare, and hi-hat. It's like, and I tried not to make any comments, but I know I hit him up just a couple of times, saying, won't you have more feeling if you put the whole thing together? And so anyway, I was always a little resentful, I guess. Resentful is maybe the wrong word, but disapproving of that technique that they use for recording Tusk. And we can get more into other stuff about it too that I agree with or disagree with. But that was one thing about the drums. And so we're talking since 1979 until now, which is quite a long time. I mean, we're talking about 45 years or something. I've been thinking that was the wrong way to do it. Well, this last year, I had to eat my words. 45 years later. And with my new digital drums, I got the Roland TD-17. And I try to always play the whole set. Most of the time when you hear my drums, you'll hear me playing the whole kit. But I make mistakes. I'm not the greatest drummer. I couldn't play drums during all the years I was homeless. Well, not entirely. I met a guy who played guitar, Dan. And anyway, he's got a couple names. But great guy. We'll talk more about him later because we did a commercial together I produced. But anyway, Dan, played guitar. And so he would rent a rehearsal room that came with a drum set. So that way he could plug into an amp and play loud. And then I'd get a drum set. So I'd go there for free and I'd get to play drums. And I really regret that we didn't do that more often, but it was always fun. And yeah, but I always realized every time I did it, I realized, man, I feel like I'm starting over again, because I couldn't just, anyway. But yeah, I did get to play drums a few times, at least when I was homeless during that decade. Anyway, so I didn't play drums from, even playing drums for me was, do I want to talk about that? Yeah, let's talk about it for a second. Okay, so I'm on the topic. Drums. Okay, I started playing piano when I was about 5 years old, maybe 4. I started singing when I was like 2 or 3. Sing along with Mitch. They'd give me those out every year at Christmas. I'd get to sing along with Mitch this and sing along. And I'd sing along with those albums. Then I started singing along with other things. And then, of course, when I got into rock and roll, I got all the singles. And I'd be singing along to all the pop records, from the 60s. So singing is really what I did first. Piano was second, trombone was third, and then I gave up trombone for electric guitar in 1966 when I was 12 years old. So that was kind of my musical migration there. Migration, that's an interesting word. So where was I? I was talking about the, because there's so many things in this statement. So, okay, so I was talking about the drums. So let's stick with the drums. Now, when I record with the drums, if I want to be more accurate, I can actually keep a perfect kick drum beat. Well, it's actually not even perfect. I was doing one the other day, and I thought, oh man, I was nailing it. But now you look at the charts and you can see the grid lines, and see where the actual beat is, because I'm working with a metronome, so I'm clicking. Although not all my songs are metronomes. You can kind of tell when some of my songs speed up and slow down intentionally, but most of my time I'll record to a metronome. But 90% of the time, 9 out of 10 songs are metronome. Anyway, maybe more, but we'll say 9 out of 10, because I do, like I said, jam some songs, or I'll use a live performance and then add on to it, so it'll have fluctuations. Which is what I'm doing for that movie. The movie I did, the Kung Fu Cowboy at Club Coyote, 28 songs in concert. No click track. I'm performing them all live. And I decided, okay, now I'm going to make that into an album. I'm going to take all 28 of those songs and I'm going to flesh them out, rather than start them over and use a click track, like I said, do them. I thought they were good performances. They got a good vocal on them. All right, now all I need to do is put some bass on them, put some drums on them, maybe some trombones. Boom, they're done. And I'll have 28 songs, which is a pretty big album. Okay. And we'll get into the next phase after that later. Don't want to confuse you. But anyway, so I've actually getting back to Mick Fleetwood. Hello, Mick. Mick and I go back. We were in the studio with him for like a year and a half, and I worked at his home on a daily basis for, I don't know, couple months. And so, we're semi-friends. We recorded together, too. We worked on a soundtrack together. He played drums. I played bass. The sax player and the piano player from Supertramp were there. And and the guitarist from Frank Zappa was there. And so we were a band, and we performed a soundtrack for a movie. And that was cool. But that's one time I did get to record with all those guys. And if I did other sessions, that one's the most memorable for me, that's how I put it. That was the one where I really felt cool, really excited about it. And anyway, in fact, I did so cool that's how they got me into Badfinger. They referred to me, they were trying to remake Badfinger. And so they wanted to replace the bassist. The bassist, I think, survived. He'd lived, but he quit. And so they tried to reform it without him, and then he decided, you can't reform it without me. And I was working in the who's Supertramp, their rehearsal studio in Burbank. They were loaning it out or renting it to the Badfinger, and so I was there in the Supertramp rehearsal room in Burbank. They had, they rented the thing completely, and anyway, you got to get into that story. But anyway, he came back, and I think he stole all my Bayfrist because they were recording a lot of that stuff. So I probably gave him a lot of good ideas to work with on their album they put out, which I guess tanked after that. But but they recommended me for that. Did they recommend me for any other things? It would have been cool if I would have got something out of it. I've been so close to fame and stardom, and that was kind of close. And something happened where I jumped ship on that. I think I decided I could make more money if I took this carpentry job carpentry has destroyed my life in so many ways. And I think that broke that connection between me and Mick. Even though I was carpenter for him. But anyway, where was I? Fleetwood and Frank Zappa. I think I told you I worked on his studio and stuff. His kids were just like, waist high at that time, running around. Moon Unit and whatever, Dweezil, I think. I remember thinking, that's their names? Really? Frank, that's not nice. I didn't say that to him. I got along with Frank because I didn't talk to him. In fact, he was my hero. And do I end the podcast on this? Yeah, let's end on Frank. I got to get this out of my system. Oh, Tim Bogert. Oh, I got these other people I'd almost rather talk about. I'll leave Frank for another time. I'll talk about Frank later. But I worked with Frank for a couple of years. So I have an interesting perspective on Frank. Frank Zappa. Okay, where were we? A session bassist. I recorded, in fact, you can find me. I found the album. I'm on a collection. I've got the link somewhere. The song is called Living Underground. And the name of the band is Elisa and the Nomads. So the Elisa, then the ampersand, the Nomads. With a regular spelling, S on the end. Elisa and the Nomads. And that was me on bass. And that one song, Living Underground, is on some sort of LA collection of, underground new age artists or punk artists, back then. And so I went in the studio with them. Now, the interesting thing about going into that studio is that I was with another one of my heroes. My bass player hero, one of the best bass players that ever hit the world. And then he gave it up for piano. And I just feel, anyway, he was a great player. Great, amazing. I love him. He, like I said, he had a major effect on me. He's changed his name. So his name was Burns Kellogg. He was originally in a group called Mint Tattoo, and then later he became the keyboard player for Blue Cheer, which was a mistake, but a career thing. He had a job. But anyway, I don't think that was the best thing for him. He was okay, but he could have done so much more. He was a very creative person. I think that limited him. And he owned the studio. It's called Radio Tokyo. No, am I getting confused? Radio something. Anyway, whatever that was, that studio in Venice, below Santa Monica or whatever. And I should have connected with him better. I really should have. I wrote him a poem. He's on the first American Zen album. And it's called The Teacher Was He. I'm pretty sure that's it. And that was written to him, Burns Kellogg. And like I said, he's changed his name a couple of times. He was called Ethan James, which maybe is his legal name. That's what he was called when he was working as a record producer, when he produced that song I did with them. Okay, now let's end on Tim Bogert. Okay, these are my bass session years. I played bass a lot. I love playing bass. In fact, I just played bass yesterday. Yesterday or the day before, I got a new single that's going to be released on August 8th. And the song's called Slave Owners. Okay, this is going to be a little controversial, but it's basically saying that the Supreme Court are slave owners. So that's why they don't believe in birth control, is because slave owners want to breed the women. They want them to breed and produce babies. They don't want them to have contraception or birth control or abortions. A slave owner wants more and more babies. And so that's what the song is about, that the Supreme Court are basically slave owners. And that's why it's so easy to understand what they're doing. If you look at it from those perspective, it totally makes sense. Anyway, and remember, every single baby produces something like, $350,000 in taxes over their lifetime or something like that. So every one of those babies that they pump out, whether it's, no matter how tragic their life is, they don't care. But he's going to generate a certain amount of taxes and a certain amount of this and that during their lifetime. So they're valuable, just like immigrants are valuable. And so that the babies are like immigrants, I guess you could say. They're still of some value. And so that's why these slave owners, and especially the people in the South, they're against birth control. That's, it's a environmental concept. Okay, it's part of their world. Hey, we're getting close to that 15-minute mark. So where did I want to rest? Oh, Tim Bogert, real quick. Tim Bogert was the bass player for, originally, he was with Vanilla Fudge, and I saw him in concert with Jimi Hendrix. What are we talking, like 68 or something? I saw him in concert, and at a place, Balboa Stadium, I think, which they tore down later. But I saw him, and I was right up there in front. I left my girlfriend. Wasn't even really a girlfriend. She was a girl I took. Cause, it's nice to take a girl to a concert. I left her back there. Linda April, I think, was the girl I took. Anyway, I came down to the stage, and I was right there with my hands on the stage. And me and Jimmy, we had eye contact. And I heard him talk. I heard him say something to somebody else. I saw somebody who wrote a little thing about that concert. I said, hey, I was there. And I said, I was right there at the front, and nobody knew what happened at that except me, and maybe a couple other people who were right near me at the front of the stage. And Jimmy looked down at us, and I thought he was mumbling to everybody. I thought the microphone could hear it. But then when I played it back in my mind, I realized he was kind of turned, so he was aiming at us, and maybe the microphone didn't pick it up, so nobody heard him say. He said, and I won't get this literally, but maybe if I work or I get hypnotized, I could give you the exact words. But he said, basically, oh man, dropped a hit acid before the show. I can't go on anymore. I am stoned. Now, he might have even said modoed. We used to say modoed, but it was an O, stone, so it's probably, but he was mumbling, but in a lesser tone. He wasn't proclaiming it. He was just like way out of it. Oh man, I'm too stoned, and I dropped acid before the show. It's really hit me. Whatever it was. I don't remember exactly. I probably can't, but it was something along those lines. And then he just kind of was kind of staggering and just walked off. That ended the Jimi Hendrix concert, the only time I saw him in concert. But he was on acid. He was playing really good until then. And he was out of it. He couldn't go on anymore. He dropped the hat, hit acid right before the show. Now, LSD, the old-fashioned LSD, which, like I mentioned before, I was my lifestyle for how many years we say? 4. I was surprised. I don't know if I started in 66 because I became a hippie in the summer of 66. So I might have had it in 66. But 67, 68, 69, and 70, so 4, maybe 5 years. Maybe it was a half of each, so it might still only be 4, but in terms of months. But anyway, for 5 years, I was doing acid. Anyway, and the LSD 25. Stories about that later. We're over my limit. We're at 16 minutes and 30. But anyway, Tim Bogert. Let me finish Tim Bogert. Tim Bogert was the bass player for Vanilla Fudge, who were on that concert with Jimi Hendrix. And then later he was in Cactus, which had, I think, who was the guitar player? No, it wasn't Jeff Beck. And then after Cactus, but they kept the same drummer, Carmen Appice. And he'll come back later because he was actually, I met him and hung out with him a whole bunch because he was the guy who ran the recording engineer program at Studio West that I graduated from. It was like a 6-week course, 3-4 days a week. I don't know. It was really it was an amazing class. It was so great. I came out of there and I was able to walk into a studio and take over. And that's how I got my first job. I went into Bonita Recording Studio and hired it. And by the time we were done with my session there, because I was recording a song for a local homegrown album called Wishwood Bridge, by the time we were done, he goes, hey, he was letting me run the whole thing. And he said, you do it, And then the next week he called me up. Hey, I got some jobs I can't take. You want to take them? And he hired me. And that's how I became a recording engineer. That was how I got. That's right. And then unfortunately I remodeled it. And then I became a studio designer. Carpentry again poisoned me. Okay, where were we? Tim Bogert. Okay, let me finish that story real fast. Now, Tim Bogert was the only person I've ever had as a bass player. Now, my history as a bass player is a whole story in itself, which, well, all right, I'll tell it since. No, let's save it for the next video. All right, we'll start the next video with my story of my bass life, and Tim Bogert will end up being in there. My only bass teacher. All right, guys. See you in the next podcast.
No, I've been strung out down. God knows how long. Whatever I did it right, somehow turned out wrong. Is this my fate with no escape? Am I in Shanghai or Hong Kong? Lady girl, you're my life, you're my if you possess fear, I can't see it at all. your price to say no more? How do you know who's wrong and who's right? How do you know when to run and when to fight? Secret Asian girl, you're my life, you're my world. I don't want to leave you, but with you I may die. You rescued me from evil, I'm not certain why.